Let's crack on. God, it's been a long time.
Yes.
As Led Zeppelin said.
Led Zeppelin said
yeah, it's been a long time since I rock and roll. You must know that. First album? Come on. I thought you were a classic rock fan.
I know. No, I like Zeppelin. I just don't want to hear you butchering it. That's all.
I thought it was quite a faithful rendition, personally. But anyway.
Oh, yeah. Nothing reminds one of Robert Plant.
Nothing says
Robert
Robert Plant like this. Okay.
It's good to be back.
Okay. It is good to be back, and welcome to episode 85 of the Tokyo Jazz Joints podcast. By the time we finish this, I loathe to call it a season or a series, but we are back hopefully now for consecutive number of episodes, which will take us well over the 100 mark, which is kind of incredible. And thanks for sticking with us this long. The next, let's say, 15 or so episodes are going to be documenting our experiences, travails, adventures, and exciting things that happened over the period of couple of weeks for me in May of 2025. And James, you sort of, as is your wont, dipped in and out basically of that 2 weeks based on your own busy work schedule. How are you, first of all?
I am peachy keen, back in the rough, gritty streets and feeling good. Got a nice clean house, got a pint of Guinness here ready to record. Not quite as cold and chilled as I hoped it would be. It's kind of been sitting on the table a little longer than it was supposed to, but
disappointing.
Yeah, but beyond that, no, it's good. It's been a busy weekend. Recorded the more famous of our programs, OK Jazz, yesterday for the first time in a while. So
I don't know what the R is about, but okay.
Some good feedback on that, and ready to talk some jazz with you, buddy. Man, it feels like ages since you were here.
It already feels like ages, and if anyone is sort of if anyone is unsure of just the sheer dedication given to this podcast and the sheer professionalism, I spent about 2 hours last night. So I'll give you the short version, but basically I had to get a staircase fitted up to where I ordinarily record. So there's an attic conversion. It was a ladder that made me sort of like, give me kind of almost like Santa Claus vibes going up and down this ladder. And I got very used to it from all the Jazz Keys of staircases, but we finally put in like an actual proper staircase. But in order to do that and mitigate the incredible amount of dust that comes from smashing walls and pulling off plaster, I had basically moved every single thing in this attic right to the end of the room and covered it with 2 huge sheets, which I then had to last. And it was so satisfying to stack it all together, sort of like a Tetris kind of feel, but then trying to navigate a path back to the computer in order to be able to actually do anything. I spent 2 hours last night, James, 2 hours cleaning up, tidying, stacking.
I mean, this DIY update feels like it's been 2 hours. So, I mean, I can sympathize.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what.
Yes. Nothing more riveting for people tuning into some jazz talk than to hear about housing repairs and reconstruction. But no.
Well, if anyone would like to see...
The picture you sent me is worthy of putting up, I think, on the social media feed, because
I was going to say, if anyone would like to see...
felt a little frightened when I saw what looked like a gigantic hole in your steps.
Wait a minute. Don't you be disparaging the work. These stairs were put in by a very no nonsense man from the country. From the countryside.
The pre-construction photo you sent. Yes.
It was terrifying. Well, I'll tell you something more terrifying, just to continue the DIY chat. I got so used to that step ladder that I used to come down it frontwise, like a normal staircase. That's how used I was to going up and down it. So rather than sort of scaling it like you would ordinarily a ladder, I used to come down at night, often in the dark, with a handful of stuff, like frontwise.
You know my history of perilous stairways on all of our jazz journeys, especially after I've been imbibing a little bit. So, I mean, I think I texted you like, I don't even think I would have climbed that sober if and when I was able to visit Belfast. So, thankfully, though, you've reconstructed. It is looking much nicer.
Well, if I actually hated it because one weekend I was on my own, and it used to hang down in the landing, right? So basically, like if you were walking down the landing, you sort of had to duck your head. So when you come out of the bedroom, it's right there. So I came out of the bedroom one day with a pile of stuff, and basically turned around too quickly, hit my head on the staircase that was hanging down, and was so shocked that I fell to the ground. And then I was so mad that I kicked out in anger and like kicked a plug socket right off the wall. And then when I went to try and fix the plug socket, I used a screwdriver and electrocuted myself.
I mean, I think we may have to franchise out a sub podcast here of our various home adventures, because as I mentioned, I was up to a bit of not quite as dangerous as that this weekend, but just in case there are people out there who do find that kind of talk riveting, I mean, maybe we can do a little private episode or something. Definitely a lot of home things to discuss here. Although it's so funny looking at your pictures, how different a Japanese house is to what you've got in Belfast.
Yeah.
I would say just a wee bit thinner on the materials here, but in any case,
possibly slightly less sturdy. Anyway, you're listening
here.
to the Good Housekeeping. You're listening to the Do It Yourself podcast, episode
DIY.
1.
Your
right.
Trip,
anyway,
your trip. You were here for a total. I had it written down 16 days, but I think that's incorrect. Was it actually even less than that? It was 14 days total.
It is. And if you're one of the funders listening, it was officially 19 days, just to be clear, including the travel days. Well, not including the travel days, but including my final travel day. So, yeah, I think in total, it was 18 days. And again, doing a little bit of maths, I managed to get around a kind of a staggering 54 joints in that time. Now, I think a good sort of low 30s of those were brand new places. So I was able to photograph those. I think I've re-photographed 6 or 7 places that, I had been to, maybe photographed early on, wasn't so happy with the photos, or just again, nice chance to photograph somewhere again, with the benefit of hindsight. And then there was another handful of places that were either I just went for coffee maybe, or wasn't able to photograph, or indeed in some cases, as we will document in a few of the later episodes, places that were just actually closed completely. Not completely in the sense that they were no longer functioning, but they were closed on the days or times that we went. So it was a pretty exhausting trip. But actually I have to say, this time when I came back, I must say, I felt it was probably one of my favorite trips since I've left. And I don't know if it's because I got up to Hokkaido. I finally got down to Okinawa. So, in that aspect, at least, Tokyo Jazz Joints
I think
genuinely covers all 5 islands,
For sure. A couple reasons, though. One being, yes, it was comprehensive. 2, we did a lot better job planning this one out than the previous trip. Learned from our lessons. So things moved really smoothly for the most part. And, being pretty much the beginning of May, probably the best time of year to come to Japan, at least this part of Japan, because it's not humid yet. We're moving around. It's not winter. Yeah. It's not humid, and it was just easy. Everything seemed like, I felt like, I wasn't with you for all 54 of those places, and some of those were places that I'd already been anyway, but I felt that we were basically kicking it off. It was a good place to start. I met you right after lunch on the day that you arrived. You arrived early in the morning in Haneda, and
but just in the spirit of, I'm sure if you're on Instagram, you're not being starved of Japan suggestions or travel hacks, because it seems to be one of the only things that I ever get suggested now. But anyone looking for a hot travel hack, if you are going to Japan and you're flying in, particularly into Haneda Airport, which I would also highly, highly recommend over Narita if you can get the flights. But for the first time, I came in first thing in the morning, and there's always that thing of like going through the day, but there's just something about like having a shower, having a nap, having a reset that really helps. So this time coming into Canada, I went to the hotel that's there, and if you're prepared to splash out about, I think, 5,000 yen approximately, you can go to their onsen. And I mean, it's just wild because you've just come off this awful like 14-hour flight, you know, in economy, and then you go to this onsen and it's quiet, it's clean, it's relaxing. The indoor bath actually had a view that day. It was blue sky, so it had this perfect view of Mount Fuji. So you just sat, all of a sudden you've gone from this like pressurized cabin with people annoying you.
I'm not going anywhere, and I feel like heading up there right now. I don't live far from Haneda
It's amazing.
Airport, you know?
I highly recommend it.
Everybody has been raving about that. People who are arriving, like you said, especially those killer intercontinental flights, but also people who are departing, because I mean, you know, traveling is stressful these days.
Yeah.
And even at a wonderful airport like Haneda, I mean, it's still an airport. You're waiting in lines, you're moving heavy bags, security. Going in for that onsen is like having an herbal bath, an herbal experience before you fly. So it's just, I'm looking forward to doing it the next time I head out somewhere far away.
Well, it set me up for the day. Yeah, so you're right. I went there, got my bags dumped. Again, another amazing thing about Japan, like apart from the fact that there's a toilet on every corner, you can put your bags anywhere. There's lockers in every station. It's incredibly easy to get around. So dumped my bags, and we kicked off this trip, my trip, our trip together, and the whole day with the somewhat, and this may be purely because we've created this aura around it, but the somewhat mysterious Crescent. Tell us about Crescent, because I think we maybe referenced it on a previous episode, didn't we?
We've a couple of different episodes, because neither of us separately, and myself on two occasions, were able to visit, because one was my mistaking the days that he was closed. And the next time that I went, he had changed his opening hours. So he wasn't open at 10 o'clock in the morning anymore. And I had shown up just at 10 o'clock. He was only open from the afternoon. And so, and I think I mentioned when we did talk about it recently, I mean, it's a good hour and 40 minutes on various trains from where I live. So it's not an easy place to just stop by. You know, it's way out in Western Tokyo, in one of these old suburban neighborhoods. So it's not like what they call Newtown here, which was built like within the last 30 years. This is an old West Tokyo suburb, Hitatsubashi Gakuen Station. So it's near Hitatsubashi University, is one of their campuses. So it's got a lot of the old rundown shops and, you know, Shotengai shopping streets. And so Philip, we had a nice warm reunion at the station, and we walked up.
Wow.
And sure.
Steady on.
Except for your appalling video skills. I couldn't believe it.
Was it a firm handshake? Oh, no. Did we hug? I haven't worked out how to do the
video. Like, I think you saw my face for like half a second, and the next thing was my shoes.
and then the platform.
Platform. It's like, Jesus.
I think I was probably just so excited to see you again. I just lost all videography, went out the window.
But Crescent, you know, I remember thinking this was going to be a good omen if we could start there and actually get in, because it had been a place we had been foiled a couple times. And sure enough, we get closer and we see the gorgeous sign sitting outside. Do you remember what his external sign is on the street that he's got?
Well, I do remember the sign, but I don't remember anything.
No, it's Jazz Crescent, and he's got it's a beautiful little trumpet, like a design of a trumpet, and like a record player, all in white and black font. And it's just, you could just see like the care that he took to put into, or you know, whoever designed this design. And you know how I am, I love those signs that they sit outside. So once I saw it there, I knew we were going to get in. I was thrilled, and when we walked in. First, I mean, it's narrow. It's a narrow, small space, okay? Maybe maximum 10 people can sit there at a time, 5 at the counter and maybe 5 at the small tables. But the entire left wall, floor to ceiling, is just vinyl. I mean,
Yeah.
A lot of vinyl. I mean, he said, what's the number that he gave?
He said
me?
6,000 to 7,000 records I have here. That's
yes,
what he said
with more
when you were chatting to him.
upstairs. Yeah, so
more upstairs. That's right. Yeah, just in case that wasn't enough.
And more upstairs. But in a space that, like, unlike a place like Jamaica or Genius, where they've got those big collections, right, where it's a lot more, spread out. I mean, this is just packed in there. So I got a great picture of you sitting underneath it, just sort of like with the vinyl just dwarfing you. So right when we walked in, I was immediately like, oh, okay, this is it, Bachiri. But even better than that, Philip, what was like the really, really good omen about Crescent?
Well, yeah, I mean, this was a good omen if you believe in such things. But yeah, I mean, I was sitting with my back to the door. And again, like you said, I think I'd been once before and we've chatted about it, and I'd gone and just photographed the sign. And one of the reasons for the sort of mystery is that it's very hard to get any information about opening hours because he's really not an active guy online. And I think when you were chatting to him, he sort of said specifically he's not online on purpose. So like it was, first of all, you were chuffed to get in. Secondly, I was delighted to be there because it'd been a year. Obviously we were back together doing what we love. And then, I just turned around and this sort of kind of yellow spine caught my eye. So I was like, oh, there you go. I wasn't expecting that. So when he came over to order, I said, oh, I see you have that yellow photography book there. And he was like, oh, yeah, I bought this. And then he pulled it out. And I was like, well, actually, that's we are Tokyo Jazz Joints. Like, these are my photos. And he was like, no way. And he was like really excited. But I think it was probably not we were expecting to see the book there. Like maybe
not at all.
Other places, yes, but just not there. But I mean, again, these guys are collectors, right? So they want anything and everything about jazz and jazz kisa, and so somehow this has come onto his radar. Now he seems to probably be online like himself, but I guess Crescent itself is not.
After I talked to him a little bit, he great guy, by the way, Taguchi-san, very chilled out. He had the surfer shorts and a Hawaiian shirt.
That's right, yeah, the Okinawa shirt. You
could see that he's enjoying his retired life. He said that he doesn't do any online advertising because he doesn't really want/need any more customers because it's a small place. He's got the two guys who were there when we went in clearly were regulars or old friends of his, I could hear from their conversation. I mean, they were all retired and, this is basically what they do, like so many of the kisa that we've been to, right? So he said that you can find his personal account on Facebook where he'll post like if the place has changed hours suddenly or he's taking a day off, but he doesn't have any sort of Crescent account. And I thought, okay, that makes perfect sense given the location as well. I only people like us, right, are really going to make the trek all the way out there because it's all the way out to Kokubunji on the Chuo line, and then another sort of like smaller train. So, I can see why he would take that position. And it's funny though because I thought I had it built in my head that he was going to be one of these old dudes that was really sort of stern. And we've met them so many times before, Philip. But like the guys who are like, oh, I'm analog, I don't use online stuff, blah blah blah. But he wasn't like that at all. He was just very, none of that very mellow. At all. Very mellow, very smiley. I was really glad that like when you asked him about the book before you told him that it was us, that he didn't come out with something like, oh yeah, I got that at Disc Union, a bunch of overpriced crap.
You got to be quick. So I've learned this, not the hard way, but I've just more sort of for self-protection really. I've just learned to be like very quick. If I'm going to raise it at all, then I'm like, oh, that's my book, rather than like allowing any space for someone to go, yeah, not really for me, to be honest.
Bit artsy-fartsy, isn't it?
And then you're in this position of like, should I let them know or should I just move on? So yeah, no, but he was like he was very cool about it. And obviously Crescent was, I would describe as a very photogenic place. So fingers crossed, if another book does materialize, like there'll definitely be a Crescent shot in there. It's funny just looking at that sign actually you sent me because, I remember the sign, but looking at that little graphic, I can tell you exactly where that came from. That came from Canva, and I know because I have used that exact same record player on like a coaster design for one of the listening events.
No,
so I have like a Tokyo Jazz Joints coaster with like that little record arm on it. So yeah, but it's just so funny that he's kind of I guess possibly made that sign himself.
Well, that's because it's not, again, like not something you always would associate with an older guy, jazz kisa owner. But I mean, again, the fact that he's clued into all of, because of course he had, Kusunosi-san's books. He had a lot of like other contemporary magazines too. But in addition to all of the vinyl, which was all very classic, when I was looking around, he had a lot of contemporary jazz. I mean, a lot more contemporary jazz than you often see in the jazz kisa. And he had some flyers for some younger Japanese musicians and like current events and gigs, even a couple of like films, jazz documentary films that were showing recently in the last year or two. So he sort of has got his ear to what's happening in the contemporary scene as well. And anytime I see that, I'm always really happy, because that's something that bugs me, is when people sort of that cutoff date of what they're listening to, and anything new, it's all crap. I mean, I like to talk to these owners who have got their ear to the ground about what's happening now as well. I mean, look, we all want to hear the old classics. We've said it before. It sounds great. You can sit there and drink all day long and listen to Blue Note. But the fact that he has a collection, CD and vinyl, of current releases.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Really, really impressed me. And it was just a great vibe all around. And, he told me that because he opened in 2020, right before kind of the COVID lockdown in Japan.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was just like, wait, again? Like, it seems like we've heard this like from several
It's
places,
quite a common thing, right? Yeah, there must have been, I guess there was probably a spate of that, what do they call it, like a retirement cliff or something, where there's probably like a spate of people, just gearing up for retirement around that time, or like just before, and they've got these plans for this kind of like easy retirement.
The business year here starting in April, so people would end their job sometime in February or March if you were retiring.
Yeah.
And, that was right when lockdown happened. But I think he did get like sort of the small business support. And I mean, if you're listening to this and you're familiar at all, if you've been to Crescent or just with the western distant suburbs, you can imagine the rent out there would be pretty low. I mean, it's an old, small building. So the small business support probably would have helped him until he could open up and operate as a business. We didn't get into the whole COVID talk. I mean, it feels like a long time ago now, but I just thought that was really interesting that he didn't pack it in just because that happened. I mean, think about it. How long would it have taken him to put all those records in there anyway? 6,000 records. It was taking
and I think also like it's like you said, like it's a neighborhood place, so it's not like you're dependent. There's old guys in there that are clearly into the music, but they're also coming in there they were Knockaback Whiskies, I think, at sort of whatever time it was, like 2:00 or whatever. But so they're obviously in there to spend their weekends and just like shoot the shit. And but he had we noticed as well, he had like 4 turntables on the go at one point, and in a sort of a long tradition of these kind of records that I sort of that stand out somehow in the places that we go, and then I always make a note of them, and then they tend to sort of follow you a little bit. So he played, I don't know if you remember, he played that Sonny Rollins meets Coleman Hawkins album, which is like such a strange album. And then of course about a week later I spotted it somewhere in one of the shops and picked it up, and there's like a fairly large handful of records now that I've kind of come across in one of the places we visited, and then you kind of find that it suddenly keeps reappearing, and you manage to pick it up before you leave.
I'll tell you where it's reappearing. It's reappearing on your record shelf, because it's a fair amount is a very, very large understatement. You tend to get online within a very short time after seeing those in the Kisa. But there was that, and then there was that was it the Tommy Flanagan as well? Or am I getting ahead of myself? I thought it was Tommy Flanagan when he played in there.
I don't remember that, but I mean,
no. It was
play the jet lag card.
Yeah, no, it was. Sorry, I'm jumbling. Yeah, no, it was the Quest Mal Waldron with Eric Dolphy.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's right.
So, which is one of our favorites. So,
all
all around top notch, 5-star joint. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like you say, it was. I'm glad you kind of mentioned the Omen thing at the start, because although it could quite have easily been really jinxed things, but I mean, I'm not a big believer in omens, but having said that, like it's kind of, for me, I think, like as well, when you're coming back to see people, but more expressly to visit new places and try and photograph them and so on. I think, like, for me, it always feels good just to get one under your belt and get up and running, and it just feels like it just sets the tone. And I think, like, what a way to set the tone, rather than turning up in the first place to be closed, or not much cop or whatever. So it was a fab start, and then we hit the train back, staying out on the west, but we made our way towards Kichijoji, which again is another place that I know, and in contrast to Crescent, very active online, very very visible on Instagram in particular, which is where I know them from, and actually have to say completely not at all what I was expecting. So this place really surprised me. I don't know why I had this certain idea of it in my head, but it's not what I thought it was at all.
It's interesting because I think maybe because I had been there a couple times with good friend of the show, Plainstone, my buddy Ian, because he lives out in Kichijoji, so sometimes we've hung out there to go, and he knows the owner really well. It's Cafe Silencio, although I mean, is it actually called Cafe Silencio or is it just Silencio? I can't remember now. I'm gonna have to look that up.
I think it says Cafe Silencio on the door.
Okay, because I think honestly, I think calling it a cafe is a bit of a stretch. I mean, it is.
I'd say so.
Very, very small. It is 4 seats at a little counter in the corner, with a with on the back wall a little ledge where you could stand and have your coffee, and then a couple boxes of records on sale and some books, some like arty photo books, books from like sort of downtown New York scene. It's kind of like that sort of art vibe, I guess you would say. And he's got a turntable. But that and speakers up on the shelf above him that he plays some records, and that's it. I mean, it is as spare as you can get, and yet it doesn't feel in any way foreboding because Arayama-san, the owner, he is just a really mellow guy. He's not overbearing, but he is chatty. He does a lot of events, so people know him. I mean, I actually saw him at the record fair in Shimokitazawa right before you got here. And bought a couple of records from him, so he sells at a lot of the events, and so he's sort of like a guy that's like involved in the jazz scene, you know what I mean? And so people know him, but Silencio itself, again, quite far, because Kichijoji is one of the most crowded stations on a weekend in all of Tokyo, because it's a place people love to go shopping and eating into Inokashira Park. So we got out of there and just immediately were like, okay, we got to get out of this Ekimai because we're going to die with the crowds. And it's a good 20, would you say it's about a 20-minute walk, I think?
Well, like it just, I think at that point I was kind of, not flagging, but I was like obviously a bit tired, and we jumped on a bus, I think, for like a few stops actually, and it stopped right outside Silencio. But like I think from the photos that I'd seen, I kind of knew it's a kind of a modern contemporary space, like it's very clean in the way it's designed, it's not too cluttery and so on, but I just hadn't imagined it as this kind of I sort of thought of it more like a kind of a Hayashi type place, but it is literally just one of these, which you'll know if you know Japan, is these kind of sliding glass doors that you get on like older shops, and it just has the name on the glass door that you slide over, and for all intents and purposes, it's basically half of it's a record shop and half of it is kind of a counter where there's the audio equipment, and I mean the Japanese
use the Japanese language use the phrase coffee stand, which I think is pretty applicable, because we were actually there was a couple that came in and got their coffee to go, which regular jazz cafes you would never see that, right?
No, so you don't have a lot of takeaway cups.
So I think the fact that he does that, it's sort of like, oh, okay, people who in the neighborhood know him as well. So you could tell from the chat. The fact that it's called Silencio, clearly coming from the David Lynch film Mulholland Drive, and I mean, I think, and it's funny too, because he was playing. That day we missed it because we had been coming from Crescent, but that day was the in-store at HMV in Kichijoji, and he was playing the record, and you just completely went right out to look for it. Do you remember? He was playing it when we went in.
You're talking about omens. This has tortured me. Okay, so just for context, the record we're talking about is Fukushima by Shinsuke Fujieda Group, right? And it's just come out, and it's one of those things where, had I known then what I know now, because if you're into the music, you'll know that people are going kind of mad for this record, and people are like, it's an instant Japanese jazz classic, and it is an incredible record. And so he was playing it at the time when we were in there, but like, as it happens, I had met, I think, or I was planning to meet a guy called Zach, who runs a record shop called Ogene Records in Melbourne. And I hadn't met him yet, but as it happens, coincidentally, we'd been in touch about the book, and then he was in Japan buying records. And I looked at Instagram in Silencio, and I noticed that he had posted about this record. But not only had he posted about this record, he had this signed copy. And I was like, what the hell is this? And then, of course, the owner said, oh, yeah, they're doing like a in-store around the corner at HMV, right? And I was like, well, that's annoying that I've missed that. But I thought, well, look, do you know what? I'll get it at some point during the trip or whatever. Anyway, not wanting to carry records around, which never really works out, but I tried to hold off buying records as long as I could. And then, of course, got back to Tokyo at the end of the trip and went to like 2 or 3 shops to buy this record before I left, and no one had it. And like, I went into Disc Union one night, and this guy, very cool guy, came over and he was like, oh yeah, we did have that. And then he's sort of like, and then he's like, oh yeah, I know the one. He's like, yeah, kakkoi yatsu da ne. And I was like, yes, yes, it's very cool. That's why I'm trying to buy it. And of course he's like, no, I'm sorry, it's sold out. And I went into like a blind panic. So I went straight back to the hotel and I bought it online from a Dutch store and got it shipped to Belfast, because I thought this is definitely one of these records that's gonna like sell out. And I think there was only maybe like 1,000 copies. And of course now everybody seems to be posting about it, and some people are on there saying, you know, where can I get a copy of this record? So I'm really happy that I got one. I'm just a bit sad that I hadn't moved quicker, because like we could have just probably popped round HMV right on the way back to the station.
They would have been. I mean, and it's crazy because that record is now showing up all around, the jazz sort of radio and podcast.
It's everywhere.
Worlds, like it's just become one of those sort of out of left field hits that you would never really have expected. And it is, I mean, it's a great record for sure. But yeah, it was kind of a bummer that we missed that in store, but I mean, I'm sure that he's going to be playing a lot on the back of that now, definitely here in Japan, but I wouldn't
actually, I
think
head
over to Europe.
I'm pretty sure I think he has an official launch for the record, I think in July, and actually Kuroda-san, Daisuke Kuroda, will be DJing at it. So like you can, if you're in Japan, you can find it online. But funny, and just one of those, incredible sort of little interconnected sort of anecdotal things that the project tends to work in. Mike Peden, a friend of Mike Peden's called Miles Copeland, and I'm pretty sure it was actually Tony who introduced me to Miles. But either way, I'd been in touch with Miles about various stuff when I was living back in Dublin. And then out of the blue, he contacted me recently to say, look, I'm going to Japan in a few weeks. I'm doing this show on Soho Radio, and I'm going to kind of do a Japan special. Do you want to come on and talk about, Tokyo Jazz Joints and the podcast in particular? And then he asked me, to kind of choose a track to introduce, after I'd done the interview. And of course, I chose this Fukushima track. So then it was a chance to like talk about it again and tell that story. And it's just amazing. It's just like another one of these incredible kind of connections, and how like, this project and the podcast and just music in general just brings like people together, and there's all this overlap and there's all this interconnectivity, and it's just really incredible.
Yeah, completely, because Ariyama-san at Silencio, when he was playing it, and he was just like, oh, have you guys heard this? Did you just come from the in-store? And we were like, oh no, exactly. We missed that, unfortunately. But I mean, that was, again, it was sort of like everything being interconnected. It was just one of those moments. So I mean, Silencio, again, I think that a lot of people that listen to the pod who are not in Japan but come to visit, Kichijoji is one of those areas that is really popular to spend the day hanging out, shopping, drinking, eating, whatever. And so if you're like us, if you're a music geek, Silencio is going to be definitely on the radar. And I forgot this as well. Ariyama-san himself, I mean, I guess he's in his mid 40s. I can't remember exactly his age, but he sort of came out of the club world. He was like a club DJ.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's why, and then I forgot that, because amidst some of the most of the jazz records that he was selling, there were some sort of like deep house records, and I was like, oh, don't know what that's about, But he sort of came out of that world, and eventually sort of moved more into the sort of jazz world in Japan. But that is his background. So like, he's also somebody that knows about the entire DJ scene here too. So a guy that you could really just get a lot of great local info from. And when he's at the record fairs, he does tend to sell like a lot of different genres too. So I would say if you're in town for when one of the whether it's the a bonus track in Shimokitazawa, which is 3 times a year, he's always there with about 4 or 5 boxes. So well worth checking out his collection.
It just shows, though, I think, like how sort of you get into that kind of race mode where we're like, okay, we have a plan for today and let's stick to it. And it would have been very easy just to pop into HMV, but you're just in that zone of like, okay, where are we going next, and kind of trying to maximize that time. And of course, like on some trips you tend to go into record shops, so you pass record shops and you go and have a look. But I think, again, just because it was day one, I was like, okay, let's hit the ground running. And anyway, like it's all's well that ends well. I managed to get the record, albeit not signed, but yeah, it's an absolute banger. So that was kind of the 2 places that we did that day. And then the final place, I think we went and had some food, but the final place I think was really what can only be described as an oversight on our part, right? Because the third place and where we finished the day was just really kind of an incredible place. I don't know still how we haven't
I've got to take the hit on that. It's an oversight on my part because I had been there many times, many years ago. It is the classic, one of the oldest places in all of Western Tokyo, Jazz Bar Dongara in Asagaya, a great jazz town, which is where the Asagaya Jazz Street is. There's a whole bunch of other jazz joints there. And I think, Philip, we were trying to I remember that day trying to figure out what had happened. Why had I not listed it up that we had to go there? And I think it was because of all the times that I'd been going to Asagaya over the years, when I used to live up near there, and then after I moved to Yokohama, once I moved to Yokohama, I would generally only go to Asagaya in October for the Jazz Street weekend. And that was a sort of a weekend where the events were indoors and outside. You kind of just like walk around. And I had it in my head that Dongara had closed because on the same little alleyway where it is was where the Jazz Kisa Ellington, they were basically right across from each other. And Ellington had closed about 10 years ago. And I think in my head, I just associated that street with the place that had closed. And so anytime I was near there, I would go to the Chicago Blues Bar, which is also a great joint just down the alley. So to me, in my mind, Asagaya equaled Asagaya Jazz Street weekend and then the Chicago Blues Bar. And Dongara, for whatever reason, it sort of just was forgotten. So when we actually saw that it was, I think you had highlighted it and you were like, hey, what's this joint, man? Don't you know this? And I was like,
yeah, because actually I had sort of come across them on Instagram and been following there, and it was like, my God, this place looks amazing. I mean, it when we finally got in, and because the owner is now the daughter of the original owner, runs it now, and she actually, it was one of those brilliant Japanese moments because we were stood outside and it was like the signs were out but there was no lights on. It definitely wasn't open, and then I said something like, oh, I guarantee you someone's going to rock up in about 2 minutes just before 7, and lo and behold, this woman came up on a bicycle, very flustered, very apologetic that she was like a minute late or whatever, but she opened up.
Very Japanese apologies. I'm so sorry I made you wait. I was like, well, it's literally about 90 seconds. It's not a problem. Rui-san was great because I actually, after we determined that it was still open, and then I was checking the hours and whatnot, I sent a DM to the account, not knowing who was going to answer or if they would answer me because they didn't know me. And they did say like, oh yeah, these were the hours. And if you're a speaker of the Japanese language, you'll know that generally Rui would be a guy. And so I didn't realize that the woman we were talking to was actually Rui-san when we were talking to her for about 15 minutes. Do you remember that, Philip? Like it took, because we were chatting with her and I didn't know, was she the owner? Is she just the manager? Is she running it tonight? She's just here on the weekend? And
well, no, because we got chatting quite quickly. We were the first customers there, and we established it was 1966, and then she was very quick to say that actually this was the first jazz place in that area. And then she said, she said she took it over after her father went to dig. I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
No. That's that's your jet lag notes there. That doesn't make any sense.
No. She mentioned something about Dig.
No. The father, like so many people, the father went to Dig as a student, as so many of our jazz people did. And so then he decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to open my own place. And in those days, I mean, remember, this is almost 60 years ago. So Asagaya would have been a very distant suburb. Okay.
That's what I was thinking, right? Like you think it's so close now, but it was probably like, because people talk about, everyone's at Shibuya now, but like Shibuya 50 years ago was kind of partly countryside, right?
Run down outskirts, and so like he opened there, and there's if you look on there's a really good article, it's only in Japanese, but people can translate it, about the place. There's a great picture of Rui-san's dad in Asagaya, but he's actually standing outside of a place that you and I went to, which was Tom. Do you remember Tomu?
Yes,
in Asagaya?
Yes.
And it was really funny because when I mentioned that, and I was like, oh, that was a really old place, zannen that it closed, and she gave a big smile, but was very full of pride. She was like, yes, but we opened actually before them.
That's right. Right.
And so, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. So right away, we got that feeling. It was like, okay, she is totally into taking the legacy and the history of the place over from her dad, and continuing
that was very clear.
And it looks, I mean, it is a dark wooden bar. It's funny, it has that kind of feel, a little bit more of like a Western style, an American style bar.
It does, it does.
Jazz keys, so like the kind of like, you see that like neon light beer sign above the counter, and it's a lot of wood. But then she's playing all these jazz records. I've written down here she's playing the Keith Jarrett Standards Trio. And after that, I can't read my scribbling actually. But anyway, I mean, it's a full-on proper jazz bar. And so we got into, once we started explaining about the project, she was, really excited about it. And okay, Philip, I just remembered. Do you remember that? Because I had to run. I had to really run.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I can tell you why you didn't remember any of the records, because you were only there for about 15 minutes and you just abandoned me. You're like, sorry, I got to go.
I had to. Well, listen, okay, you insisted on taking a 1 hour tonkatsu break. Okay, so I told you it was rough on time. I had to get back to walk my dog. My son wasn't here. So anyway, I was only there for, I have it down that I was there for 26 and a half minutes. So just enough time to kill a beer and have some chat.
Unbelievable.
And then and ran out. But you had asked me, oh, James, bring me a copy of the book so I can, like, it's always nice when I can pull it out to show people. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I realized within about 2 minutes of you handing over this book to her that she thought you were giving her the book. It was so obvious.
It's not so much that she thought, but there was that sort of like, I think generally in Japan, people will not assume, right? So they will give you stuff back even when you give them something. But I think it was more, there may be some ambiguity here, and then actually just thought, do you know what? Like, what a great place to have the book in. And, they just, the fact that it was these two younger women that were like running this place with all this legacy, she referenced her father. She like pointed towards his picture on the bar behind us. And
it was so nice to see that. I mean, it was just like,
it's just beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Because also, I mean, Philip, you notice, and I think a lot of our listeners probably know if they spent time in Japan, is that people of a certain generation of Japan are not going to openly express that kind of sort of, basically just love and devotion to their family. It's not that they don't have it, it's just that they're not expressing it in that sort of open way, the way some cultures might. And yet you could see how devoted she was to her father and how much she missed him. And I just thought she was just a absolutely lovely, charming person. And, I was happy that you gave her the book. And do you remember what happened the next day? Because you ended up staying quite a while. I had to race all the way back to Yokohama.
Yeah, so like after you left, so what had happened is when you left, I sort of thought, well, look, I'm there's no point in me to rushing off back to the hotel by myself. No dog for me to walk. So I actually stayed on for a fair bit, and she had produced these like unbelievable collection of matchbooks, like what more than I've ever seen anywhere. And she kept saying, look, generally I don't really bring these out. We don't really show these to people, but like, you seem like you'd be interested, whatever. And so I kind of sat for a good 30, 40 minutes, just flicking through these like unbelievable amounts of matchbooks. And like we've seen a lot of matchbooks in different places we went, but some of these ones were just absolutely wild and funny. And a little nod to a forthcoming episode, I'm just noticing here, one of the ones I photographed was actually for Paragon, which we've talked about before. But funny enough, Paragon, it was like a back-to-back with Paragon. So it was obviously the same place. So one side of the matchbook is Paragon, but you'll not believe there was a place called Pepper, named after Art Pepper, which is advertised as curry and coffee. Oh. So not the first iteration of jazz and
even
curry.
Even back then, the customers had to be subjected to that. Christ.
Anyway, so like it was sort of for me. I mean, again, just kind of, it was just heaven really, because like I'd come off this flight, I was back again after a year, and just to be sitting there in that beautiful place. There's one other really old guy came in. They were kind of like, I get, it seemed like he was family, but they were sort of like really like taking care of him and making sure he got home and so on and so forth. But I just sat there and chatted to them intermittently, and then just looked at these incredible matchbooks. And just a beautiful, beautiful place. I mean, so just steeped in like history, steeped in like the culture, and it was just a fantastic way to not quite round off the evening, but I did go to one more place.
You could have, and I have had this many times in the past when I used to live up to, a lot closer, but you could have an entire evening just on that alleyway with a couple of great sort of yakitori and kushiyaki joints where you can sit outside. So when the weather's nice, there's nothing finer than sitting outside in those Tokyo streets, in the alleyways with the lanterns, having your beer, having your food, and then popping into Dongara, and then popping into Chicago Blues Bar. I mean, Asagaya is just a great town, and it was a really good really, really good start to the trip. And Philip, just to bring it back, like you were saying, to bring it full circle, how everything's connected. So the next day I replied to her message saying, okay, thank you so much for, hosting us. And it was really great. She again made the very Japanese polite apology for making us wait the 90 seconds. And then she said, by the way, after you left, much later after you had left, Philip, she was showing the book to one of her regular customers. And immediately the guy goes, oh, I know James. I know him really well. And it was Hanawa-san who used to be the main buyer at Disc Union. He lives in Asagaya. And so I used to see him every year at the Asagaya Jazz Street, because Disc Union would be out there selling at the tent. And now he owns his own shop in Asagaya. So she was showing him the book, and right away he's like, oh yeah, of course I know this. I know James. I've known him for years. And so it was just, again, one of those moments where it's sort of like, the work that we've done over the years, and sort of like the recognition, and that the fact is like that we're sort of kind of tied into this jazz community made me feel really, really happy. And it was just a really great nice, Genki way to start this year's journey.
Yeah, it's funny. I also got a message, and there's a sort of a little hint at the end of like, oh, I'm looking forward to the second book, as if to say, and make sure that Dongara is incled. But
and make sure the one you give her is from your collection and not mine next time. Right?
Yeah. I just noticed even as well, actually, that they had this calendar up too, which is something you don't often see. But they do have gigs as well. But in this calendar, they've got actually on the calendar on the weekend, on the Friday and the Saturday, they seem to be closed on the Sunday and Monday. But on the Friday and Saturday, they actually have who's working, right? So you can see, you want to come in and hang with your favorite staff member, you can come in and do that. But what it would seem to me from this is that all the staff are female, which again, probably with the exception of Masako is not the most common thing in jazz kisa in a lot of these joints that we go to, but it seems to be in Dongara, which is amazing to see.
I think it is amazing to see, because we know how unfortunately it is still such a sort of male-dominated space in so many ways, What I'm curious is, and the next time in this coming October, when I do go up to the Jazz Street weekend, I'll stop by, maybe I'll ask, but I noticed that they don't host any of the Asagaya Jazz Street events, and it's pretty notable because them being the sort of the oldest bar.
Yeah.
But I know from other, and for listeners who don't know, that's what in Japan they call like a jazz festival that goes over a couple days, jazz storito, right? So you got in front of the station, you have in front of like the city hall, then you've got clubs where you buy a ticket, you can go in and out of all of them. And there's just dozens and dozens of live performances over the weekend. But I know from down here in Yokohama, because one of my favorite bars declined to join in, and apparently there's a lot of like sort of financial obligations that go with it because these things are sponsored by the city. I mean, look, it's great that local civic governments are supporting jazz festivals. I'm super happy about that. But if they're not making it beneficial to the actual jazz shops themselves,
well, that's the point. Yeah.
Then who is benefiting this? So I always wonder when you notice one like right in the center of the festival, and it's like, nope, no events this weekend, but we're open, and you're like, okay, there's something going on there. But it's often a little hard to figure out. So maybe I'll ask Luis on that next time I go back. But anyways,
yeah. Well, look, You dumped me, and I don't know. Like we talked about this a lot. I don't know. I mean, I there's nothing I love more than to just lie on a sofa in the evenings. But for some reason, when I go back and I'm in that sort of frame of mind, that just the adrenaline just keeps me going. I don't know how. It's really not my personality at all. So it's kind of interesting. But I'm also quite bloody minded, and so I just kept going and actually went back to where I was staying and thought, Beth, what better place for a nightcap than the wonderful Posey. So actually I finished the evening in Posey, had a lovely chat with Misa-san's daughter, and I cut the visit slightly short due to the neighboring presence of three, shall we say, non-Japanese clientele who I could obviously understand everything that they were saying. It was driving me insane. And then the low light of the evening was when one of the three aforementioned customers, who was French, actually asked the other two how to say, "Can I eat this in here?" in Japanese. And then he said to Misa-san's daughter, "Can I eat this in here?" and produced, and this is not a joke or a stereotype, literally produced a block of cheese, which he then proceeded to eat in Posey along with his highball. So I thought, do you know what? It's probably time for me to go. However, what was really cute and a lovely way for me to finish it.
Absolutely loved to have seen your face then. It would have been great.
Yeah, I was absolutely, as you would say, apocalyptic with rage. But basically, Misa-san's daughter, just a very lovely woman. And it was funny because just at the end, it was like she'd sort of been building up to this question, because they also had the book there that I think they had been actually sent by someone. They hadn't bought it. I think she said someone in New York or someone had sent it to her. And I said, she sort of said to me, can I just ask you a question? And I was like, oh my God, what's coming here? And she said, well, why did you choose that picture to put in the book? And the picture that she's referencing, there's two pictures of Posey in the book. It's not the sign of the Bill Evans sign, but it's actually the one where there is a handwritten sign in the doorbell. So Posey is very unique in that, if you ever come in and there's no one there, and this, I think, particularly when Misa-san was running it herself, she was often out the back. So there's a little doorbell, and it just says in Japanese, it tells you to press the bell and wait, and then also there's a translation of English which says, please push this doorbell softly, underlined, thank you. And the reason she asked me, she said, well, why did you choose that picture? And I said, well, and like it sort of took me by surprise. I said, well, just it's more kind of instinctive. I thought, that's an interesting picture. It's in Japanese and English, so more people can access the picture. And also it's just very unusual because, like, where I'm from, it's almost unthinkable that you would go, certainly in a city, that you would go into a place and there would be no staff there and they would trust you just to press the button or whatever.
Certainly not a bar.
No, certainly not a bar, right? Because the shelves would be clean. But then she sort of said, well, actually, I wrote that sign. And I thought, it was so cute. And I was like, oh my God, you wrote it? So she's like, yes, I wrote that. So she was obviously kind of chuffed that sign had been chosen to go in the book.
I'm glad, because I wouldn't have wanted her to think that we were, making fun of it, or you know what I mean? Like, I mean, clearly from the tone of the book, you would
no, of course
realize
not that.
Everything we've done is very respectful, but like, you know, there is always that possibility that she might have thought like, oh, you know, they're making fun of my like kind of weird English, or the fact that there's a bell, like it's kind of Japanese thing, you know what I mean? So I'm glad she understands that it was not that at all. That it's just one of those unique parts of just like of every joint that we visit that has that sort of individual touch to it, and that's not something I've ever seen anywhere else. Like, you know, please press bell for service. You know what I mean? Like if you go in a hardware store or something. So I've never seen this in a jazz place before. So yeah, it is like a sort of a mark of what Posey is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was a nice way to finish off day one of, I think, well, let's say 18 days. But yeah, absolute beautiful day. 4 joints, all belters. And actually, it was actually my 5th, because I was at another place that day. But I ended up going back to it subsequently towards the end of the trip. So I think we'll save it up for a following episode. So look, good to be back on the mic. I don't know how you feel, but it's a bit longer than we thought. It was going to be about 30 minutes in our head. It seems to be up to nearly 56 now. So,
well, we did have what was it, about a 16-hour detour
20-minute DIY section.
So, yeah. Oh, and another half an hour on your record buying habits, but at least that was slightly musical related. True. I think our audience is so damn happy that we're back that they would listen to us talk about anything, including the big news happening. No, we'll save that for another time. No, got to leave.
Don't jinx it. Talking of omens, you could have jinxed us there, but anyway, look, even if you don't like listening to us, please don't stop, and we're grateful for your support. And
we know, just not to be too serious on the way out, Philip, but this will be broadcast in a couple of weeks. But just wanted to shout out the great Andy Bay, who passed away a couple weeks ago. Andy Bay was a vocalist that I think a lot of our listeners will know from the records he made with Gary Bartz and the N2 Troupe in the 70s. I just introduced one of their tracks on my podcast yesterday. But Andy Bay died at 85. But what was so interesting about him was that he lived for many years. He was HIV positive. And he was openly gay in a jazz world that very sadly, and I didn't know this after I read a long article about him, he still faced a lot of homophobia. And there's still a lot of homophobia in jazz, which is really sad to read. But anyway, I just wanted to shout him out because he's one of those great jazz legends that I think, Philip, you'll know his voice immediately when you hear it, even though you might not remember his name. And a lot of people out there listening will recognize his voice. He's just one of those great jazz characters when you read about the totality of his life. And the fact that he had success at such a late age to get some recognition and finally some financial success and security as well. And that he lived with, obviously, that health condition for many, many years before dying at 85. I felt really just touched reading about him and just wanted to show my respect. So, RIP to the great Andy Bay.
And on that note, thanks for listening. This has been episode 85. We'll see you in episode 86. In the meantime, James, take care of yourself.
Talk to you sooner than you might think.